Welcome to the Vandy Sports Podcast. I'm your host, Chris Lee. Our guest today will be Mitch Light of Athlons, who is also the sideline announcer for Vanderbilt football. This episode presented by the Well Coffee House, which is a Nashville area coffee house that provides fresh roasted coffee along with its house-made pastries, breakfast, and lunch offerings. 5 locations to serve you in the Nashville area. Those are found in Brentwood, Green Hills, downtown, Bellevue, and the Cool Springs Lifeway. More information can be found at wellcoffeehouse.org. The Well Coffee House, where coffee changes lives. We also thank our co-sponsor, WellSpire, Nashville's Learning and Development Center, which is located in the Gulch. Today's news presented by Sutherland & Belk, a family-owned injury law firm. If you or a loved one has been hurt in any type of accident, call Taylor or Russell at 615-846-6200 to see what your rights are and if they can help. Vanderbilt sweeps Auburn at home in baseball. Commodores now 15-6, tied with Arkansas atop the SEC standings. Game coming up with Tennessee Tech at Hawkins Field on Tuesday. Mitch Light joins us now, thankfully back after a while. Mitch had an extended illness to deal with. It just was something else, but we're glad you're back, Mitch.
Yeah, thanks, Chris. Was out, missed about a month of work, had a unexpected 10-day stay in the hospital. The good people at St. Thomas Midtown Hospital treated me well, but all's good. I am back to, I'd say, 90% on my way back to 100% pretty soon.
You were rounding into postseason form.
I expect to be ready for the postseason, put it that way.
Right. Well, speaking of postseason, the baseball team will be there before long, and I am just really impressed with what I'm watching right now.
Yeah, Chris, it's hard not to be. And it's funny you mentioned, approaching postseason. As the Vanderbilt program was getting better it took a big leap, but, in the 2000s, the key was always, when you watched SEC baseball before expansion, was 8 teams made the SEC tournament 8 of 12. And it was pretty much, if you made the SEC tournament, you were going to make the, regionals. I'm sure it wasn't a hard, fast rule, but, through the 2000s, and it usually meant if you got 14 SEC wins, you were going to make the tournament. So I remember just watching and counting the SEC wins when, it ended up being a sure thing because I think Vanderbilt's obviously made it every year since 2006. But it was like that, getting to that magical 14, or if you got to 500, you were in. And it's just now you look at the not that there's any doubt this year, but the fact that this team already has 15 SEC wins with 3 series to go is impressive. And I know baseball, you can look at a lot of games like this, but then you look back how much better off this team could be if it, that Texas A&M game on that Saturday, and then obviously the Arkansas game. You can also argue they stole one at Georgia on that Friday night. So I know I'm rambling a little bit, but yes, very impressed. The depth of the lineup to me is what makes this team stand out. I mean, they were without Pat DeMarco for a while. They were without Cooper Davis for a while at the same time. Then you got a guy like Isaiah Thomas comes in and hits the ball well. The starting pitching has been good enough. There's been some not so great performances where they've managed to hit their way to wins. And, obviously, if you're looking for a complaint, the only thing you can point to is consistency in the bullpen. Sometimes a guy comes out like Hugh Fisher and looks unhittable. Sometimes he looks or can't throw a strike. Tyler Brown's been phenomenal except for that one game against Arkansas. Hopefully everything's okay on the home front with him and he can get back. So, Chris, there's really just a lot to like with this Vanderbilt baseball team right now.
Yeah, one difference in this team and some of Tim's elite teams is this one has some parts in reserve that I don't ever remember a team having. I'm trying to think of teams that he's had that have had major injuries. I can't think of that many. I know in 2008, Pedro Alvarez missed about half the season. That team ended up kind of washing out, got beat in a regional out at Arizona State. So I don't know that team was going anywhere in the end. But this one, you've got Austin Becker hasn't thrown in a month. Jackson Gillis, I think, has thrown 1 inning in a month, and that was against MTSU. You've got Cooper Davis out. You had Pat DeMarco out. Now you got Steven Scott out. Jason Gonzalez. Yeah, this team is unique in that there's so many parts that aren't being utilized that they could sustain some disasters in some areas and still be okay.
Yeah, I mean, like a guy like I just mentioned, Gonzalez, who, the sample size wasn't good and he was still striking out some, but he looked like a much improved hitter this year and, can't get on the field. And Ty Duvall has forced his way into the lineup. He's even hit against lefties. And I've never seen him, I'm sure that the coaches chart this. I bet he's hit 8 to 10 line drive outs in the outfield this year. You probably have the BABIP numbers, but I bet his BABIP is low, and maybe it's coming around as his average climbs. But he's a guy that just, is a luxury to have as a third catcher or second catcher or DH, and then if you don't play him, can come off the bench. So yeah, just the overall depth. You look at this lineup, and now that Julian Infante is hitting some, there's really no hole in the lineup, and that's very difficult in college baseball. To feel good 1 through 9.
Yeah, the bullpen is the part that we're all concerned about. Fisher and Eater had mixed success this weekend. Well, Eater really was bad, I guess.
Yeah.
Fisher was usual Hugh Fisher, hard to hit, but makes it interesting with some free passes and things like that.
Correct me if I'm wrong. Sorry, the 8th inning, I thought Hugh Fisher had some bad luck, and I watched a lot of baseball. Was at a lot of baseball. He threw 2 innings on Saturday. I think that first inning he got into trouble were 2 kind of seeing eye ground balls. It was the 9th where he kind of was walking some guys. So I might be wrong there, but he as usual, he had devastating stuff. Just got to harness it.
No, I think you're right. In fact, I keep a scorebook for games that I go to. I'm gonna pull that up. I do think there were a couple of balls that maybe didn't get out of the infield against him. Maybe a defensive misplay that went for a hit. I mean, something
Harrison
like that.
Ray dropped the ball,
the double play that would have been, which they got on the next one.
Yeah.
Single, strikeout, single, E4 double play was that one. And then the last inning, he went, single, strikeout, walk, strikeout, fly to left. So
yeah, in the 8th, I don't think either one of those balls were necessarily hit hard, kind of seeing. So not making excuses. You don't want your relievers to load the bases twice, but there were some extenuating circumstances there.
Well, the piece that I liked this weekend was Ethan Smith.
Yes, he came in on Sunday. Yeah, Sunday in the 8th and 9th, right? Or the 8th.
Came in, I think, the 9th and got, what was it, an out, and then I think gave up a walk and then got a fly ball.
Yeah.
So
now he's someone, I think they're going to need. I was at the game Saturday talking to some friends, and you knew they liked him a lot. Obviously, you'd heard that, but the fact that he pitched that first weekend or pitched early in the season, when they have high hopes for freshmen when they pitch early in the season, and he's had his ups and downs, but I think he'll be a key piece.
Yeah, the question I have now is just what do they get out of Gillis? Is Becker a usable piece? Of course, they don't talk much about it, but that's what I want to know is exactly how much do they have in tow in that bullpen?
Yeah, interesting. Zach King did not pitch this weekend.
Yeah, it did warm up.
Okay. So they brought in Eater over King, I guess, Fisher over King, different spots. I'm sure they have different, scouting reports on hitters and stuff like that, but I thought that was interesting. It's a team that, I would say, with the exception of the bullpen, is pretty much excelling in every area right now.
Well, and what they're getting, this is underrated. People look at ERAs. I don't look at just that. I look at how many innings can you go. I mean, you might have a 3.5 ERA, but you might be good for 4 or 5 innings max. These guys now are pretty consistently really throwing out the rough 2-start stretch that Raby had, getting into the 6th, the 7th, sometimes the 8th. And that's, even in a league like the SEC where there's a lot of arms, that's hard to do. That's more rare than you'd think.
Yeah, and you look back to the Super Regional. I don't think Vanderbilt got even maybe the Clemson Regional. I know Drake Fellows, he pitched well in the first game, I think, but I just think back to the Supers, and it's just like getting to for both teams, like getting into the 4th inning was like, oh, you got, your starter got into the 4th. It was just then you're forced to stretch your bullpen so much. So obviously what you said makes sense. If you can get 6 innings out of your starter, then you can mix and match your way for 3 or 4 more innings.
Well, and that's why I think the bullpen is going to end up not being as big a detriment as people think, because A, you've got that. B, you've got Mason Hickman, who can easily get into the 7th. So that gives you 4 guys. Then on top of that, like I said, you've got Tyler Brown will be back. Like, if he pitches this weekend, there's probably a few runs that aren't scored. I think that Eater and Fisher are still usable pieces. I think King is. Gillis may be. Ethan Smith, I think, is. I just think that you got so many options there that, look, could it be the thing that when we're having a podcast and let's say they don't win at all, would that be the thing that did them in? Yeah, it might be, but I'm not sure that when you throw Hickman in there that they can't make it on what they've got.
Yeah, the only other concern I would have is running into in a must-win game in a College World Series or a Super Regional, going against a really tough left-handed pitcher. Now they've hit them, but this is a lineup that's predominantly left-handed. Or that's why getting Pat DeMarco was so important, and maybe the emergence of Isaiah Thomas. But we saw it kind of at Texas A&M to some degree, a team that had two really good lefties. That would be my big, other than the bullpen, that was really my only concern, is just coming up against an elite lefty in a must-win game.
Yeah, I'm right there with you, because the only teams that have really slowed them down are Georgia and Texas A&M, and that was just times where they got literally elite pitching that weekend, or at least A&M did on Sunday. Friday and Saturday, Vanderbilt hit those kids who were really good arms too, by the way. High.
Yeah.
So, I mean, sometimes they've even done that. Yeah.
That's evidence to the contrary of what we're saying, but it just makes sense, with that lineup that could give them some problems.
Yeah, I would rather face like an Arizona State that can really hit the ball than I would like an A&M or a Georgia again in the postseason. I'm with you. I think that's
short series. Yeah, short series, which Vanderbilt's not going to be facing Georgia, both being probably national seeds. But obviously we know the example you mean. Right,
or maybe one of these teams that like loses a couple of midweek games and was expecting to be a 2, but or expecting to be a 1, but is instead a 2. But even then, I don't think that'll happen. I don't think they S-curve the regional pairings, but I don't think they're going to stick, say, the first team out of the discussion for a hosting spot in Nashville, given the way Vanderbilt's played. They're not going to stick them with like a powerhouse 2. So
I think the fact that the S curve exists now for the supers, for the top 16, is important. That's why you want to keep winning games. There's a huge difference if you're a national 1, 2, or 3 seed and playing the 14th, 15th, or 16th best team. At least I think there's a difference than playing the 8th or 9th team, or 9th, 10th, the team that just misses out. That's just keep trying to win games, or as you've written on your site, they're in a really, really good spot right now.
Yeah, I'm going to update that this week, but I don't see them being any worse than the 2 right now. Do you?
Yeah, I mean, you never know. The problem, we can all look at the schedule and say how it's so relatively, for the SEC, soft down the stretch. So they should take care of business. But if they stumble to some degree, there'll be some quote unquote bad losses in there that, I think the worst SEC team right now is like South Carolina at 54 maybe. So they're not awful losses, but as long as they take care of business and win these series, they're in really good shape.
Yeah, I think right now, if you did it, UCLA is probably the 1. They're probably the 2. It would take a collapse of like monumental proportion for them not to be a national seed now. Or do they call them protected seeds? I can't remember what the term is, but top 8. But anyway, let's get into the mailbag, which is sponsored by Vanderbilt fan Josh Minton, an independent insurance agent operating out of Brentwood. Looking for a one-stop shop to take care of your insurance needs? Josh has you covered. Call him today at 615-933-1979. Email him at josh@hqinsurance.com. Follow him on Twitter at Joshua Minton HQ, or on Facebook at facebook.com/JD Minton HQ. He's my insurance agent. Give him a try. Tell him you heard about it here. I think you will be very pleased. Okay, we got some basketball questions. Raiders 1967 says, can you address facilities, timing of admissions decisions, grad transfer admissions, and funding for more staff? I guess he means how Vanderbilt will handle those things in regard to the Jerry Stackhouse hire.
I cannot. I'm sorry, Chris. As I talked earlier, part of I was out of the loop, basically out a month sick, and have been basically out of the loop. Got back to once I got healthy again. As you know, Chris, we were on production here for our college and pro football magazine, so I've been working a lot. So I really, haven't talked to many people over at Vanderbilt. Heard some things, but so really, there's nothing specific I can address. I obviously things you've talked about, things you've written about, the fact that Jerry Stackhouse is Malcolm Turner's hire, and that just goes. It's common in a lot of places when the new AD makes a new hire. He wants everything in place for that guy to succeed, so it's much more likely that things will get done that Jerry Stackhouse wants and needs than maybe in previous years. So, but nothing really specific. I wouldn't want to talk about anything I don't know the answer to.
Yeah, I'll give a little insight here. I think that facilities are going to get addressed. I've been hearing that for a while. I think that admissions decisions, if what I heard last week was true, they have been addressed or are being addressed. I think that Jerry is going to get some leeway with kids that staffs before him have not. Now, the grad transfer admission is the one that's tricky because those are smaller programs. There's not as many spots. That's the one that I'm more pessimistic about. And oh, by the way, I've been thinking for a while that they were going to get Drew Richmond in the program on the football side. In fact, if you'd said a month ago who will be their starting right tackle next year, I would have said Drew Richmond. I think there may have been issues with grad school with Owen. I'm not sure, but he ended up choosing Southern Cal. And maybe that wasn't it. I don't know. He kind of blew up in Alabama and Oklahoma, and some teams like that were interested. But I thought they were going to get Drew Richmond. They did not. So the grad transfer thing is the one that I think is going to be tough. I don't know if that'll be resolved or not, but I'm hearing the other things are being addressed. So that's what I know.
And I'm kind of speaking as an alum and a fan of the programs. That doesn't bother me. If Vanderbilt has trouble getting every kid in for grad school, I'm fine with that. Like you said, they're smaller programs. There's graduate programs. They're highly ranked grad schools. It's very different than having a kid come for undergraduate because I've talked about this over the years. I think the average fan would be surprised how lenient, if that's the right word, admissions for athletes are. Now they're definitely higher. It's more difficult than every other school in the SEC and almost every other school in the country. You got your Stanford obviously is recognized as the hardest. But coaches who work with admissions and admissions can get kids into school. I don't think that's ever really been an issue. Sure, there's certain kids that haven't gotten in, but that's the deal at Vanderbilt. So I guess my long-winded answer, they've clearly been able to get some kids in for grad transfers. If they lose some because it's more difficult at Vanderbilt than it is at other schools, I'm fine with that.
Okay, GoVanity2 wants to know what your industry colleagues are saying about Stackhouse and his chances at Vanderbilt. And by the way, feel free to throw in your own opinion on that one too, since I've not asked you yet.
Yeah, I've talked to a few, quote unquote, national people about it. I think intrigued is the word everyone uses. My opinion is, it would not have been my choice going in. But we haven't talked about this a lot. A guy that I liked, I don't know a ton about him other than he's done a good job in a short amount of time, was John Brannon, the coach at Northern Kentucky, who went on to coach at Cincinnati. There weren't a lot of really fits or hot mid-major coaches. So it seems like certain years there's a lot of guys out there that, fit the profile. There weren't a lot of guys that fit the profile. So I'm intrigued. I think this is a low floor, high ceiling hire. I don't think it's fair when you compare this one to some of the other quote unquote NBA guys like a Chris Mullen or a Clyde Drexler who went back to their alma mater. Clearly Jerry Stackhouse has been a head coach at different levels or, the G League. I'd heard before his name ever came up for Vanderbilt, that he was highly respected and would eventually be an NBA head coach and all that. So I'm intrigued. I'm optimistic. That's my nature. I go into all these things, hoping it works out. So again, it's all about players for the most part. But as we've seen, it's a lot of coaching goes into that too. Because I think you would agree with me that this past year did not think this was the best coached basketball team we've seen.
No, it wasn't. And I guess part of me says, well, you could sort of compare it to maybe a team taking a good AAA manager and make him a college coach. I think it's a little different than that because Jerry Stackhouse has AAU connections. And the other thing is, the Mullen thing is not a good comp because Chris Mullen, I don't think, had ever coached before. So it is a unique hire. There's a couple ways to look at this. One of them is that I looked up, and I did this, I talked about this on a podcast with Seabass. I looked this up. The other 13 coaches in the SEC in their college coaching careers are 2,264 games above 500. When you run them down and look at their individual coaching records, the average coach in terms of winning percentage is Rick Barnes, like a national coach of the year, is average in that league. And your worst coach is Tom Crean, who's won the Big Ten twice and been to the Final Four, according to winning percentage. So Tom Crean took over a disaster at Indiana, and his winning percentage suffered because of that. But it is what it is. here's where I'm going. I guess you could say, well, you could try to match wits against with the coach like-minded, which you're probably not going to get right now. John Brandon might have been maybe the best that they had a shot at. That was a name that we heard early. Or you could just say, hey, if we go toe-to-toe with them and try it that way, there's a good chance we won't succeed. Let's try something different. I don't know what the right answer is, but that's kind of how I see it, given the competitive landscape of coaching in the league.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's a fair way to look at it. And I don't want to compare him to Avery Johnson because, but similar, coming from NBA background, Avery Johnson they had good players. I don't think, for whatever reason they weren't, I don't know if it was well coached or personalities, whatever. Last couple of years, Alabama has not lived up to its hype, lived up to its talent. So I think Jerry Stackhouse, I'll be intrigued to see how they do in this first, real recruiting cycle in 2020 in the fall. I think he'll get good players here. And, I'm optimistic that he'll be a good coach. I'm interested to see his style. But yeah, so that, I kind of agree. I think that's very fair. It's not like Vanderbilt had to go outside the box and make this, unconventional hire, but that's what Malcolm Turner chose to do. And we'll find out over the next few years. Well,
here's the thing that I wonder, and I didn't watch them up close. I know a lot of the Alabama people weren't blown away with Avery Johnson, but was it Avery Johnson wasn't a good coach, or was it that, again, when somebody wins a game, somebody has to lose, and the sum of that is 500 no matter what your league that you're in? Was it Avery Johnson wasn't that good, or was it just that's life in the SEC? I don't know the answer.
I would tend to side more on they should have won more games than they did. I mean, I just look at their roster. I don't watch a ton of Alabama basketball, so I can't point to should have done this, should have done that. But I was just never overly impressed with what they were doing when I watched them.
Let's see. GoVanity2 says, who do you think they'll add to the 2019 basketball class, transfers included? I'm guessing you're not up to speed on that one at the moment.
I am definitely not up to speed on that. Just like I said, been busy at work and don't follow recruiting that close. I mean, I monitor, what's going on, obviously. It's funny. What's the kid from Brown? Is it Desmond Cambridge?
Yeah.
One of my days in bed, one of my many, many days in bed when I was sick, I remember watching a Brown Princeton game that was on at like 4 p.m. our time. There was nothing else on, so I pretty much watched the whole game. And obviously he was their best player. Then I didn't even know he was from Nashville. Didn't even know he'd be coming on the radar. But it looks like, he probably is that the latest that he's going to Virginia Tech.
Yeah, that's a weird deal. He announced that he was choosing between Stanford, Vanderbilt, and Virginia Tech. Well, we checked with Stanford. He never had an offer from Stanford. I don't think he's got one from Vanderbilt either. So
yeah, he seemed to be. You look at his stats. I'm sure he's a good player, and he was forced to do too much. But he was a high volume, low percentage shooter. So you can't just look at his stat or whatever he averaged and say, oh yeah, that can translate to the SEC. So in this case, you trust the staff that they know what they're doing.
Okay, there's a few more basketball questions. They're all basically around, predicting recruits and well, here's one that I think you can answer. The one Colombiano Door wants to know if you have any thoughts on the assistant coaches and what you're hearing on the industry on those guys.
David Grace seems like to be a good fit. He's a recruit, other than the fact that he's mainly a West Coast guy, he's regarded as a good recruiter. I reached out to someone I know, national guy, about him and said, yeah, good hire. The only, just kind of different geographical footprint, but Vanderbilt has recruited to the West Coast a lot, and I think the staff will do so. So that's really, and I'm glad to see James Strong back. James, very popular player. Good to see him with a role in the staff. So other than that, not much insight.
Okay, Via Puri wants to know, as we switch to football, any further info on Jerry Godowski's offense?
I hate to keep repeating myself, but I didn't even go. I was sick basically through most of spring practice. I went to a couple practices. I talked to Derek Mason a couple of weeks ago for my Athlon story, and didn't get much insight. Other than the fact that like the changes you'll see in the offense will be a little different, but it'll be more scripted around personnel. I'm sure Jerry's got his own things. When you sit back for 3 or 4 years and watch someone else call plays, I'm sure there's things that you say, I do this differently. But I think a lot of that's going to be based on the skill set of the quarterback, how we're going to see things that are different.
Yeah, that's based on what I'm hearing too. I don't see a lot of fundamental changes to the offense, and I think the quarterback mobility will be the thing that's different that opens up the playbook.
Right, and that would have probably been the case too if Andy Ludwig had stayed. I mean, I've said this many, many times. Andy loved Kyle Shermer, so he's probably the smartest quarterback he ever coached, but was limited in things they could do. They had to do a lot of other things with protection because of Kyle's lack of mobility.
Viapuri wants to know, did you see anyone or anything in the spring game that surprised you?
No, I did not go. I was sick. I recorded it just so I could watch. I thought Riley Neal looked good early. I didn't watch much beyond some of the first team guys, so not really.
Let's see.
I'm not a very good guess. Well, I don't know if I'm ever a good guess, Chris, but a lot of my answers are like, no, I didn't see it, or no, I don't know.
Well, I kind of figured that's where it was going to go today, but
you get what you pay for, Chris.
Right, exactly. People want to know your opinion regardless. So when you're basically bedridden for a month, it's kind of that was you picked a bad time to do that.
Yeah, well, I picked a bad time. It could have been a lot worse if if it was a month later. I don't know if Athlon would be having magazines this year. Not that I'm that vital. Well, I am vital because we have such a small editorial staff. So it actually worked out that I got back just in time. But just a general opinion, I've said this before, I'm very bullish on this offense this year. I think it can be really good. I think the quarterback position will be fine. I think we talked about this before. If the offensive line can kind of gel, I think that this could be the best Vanderbilt offense that I've seen. So, we'll find out. That offensive line is going to be important. I know there's guys that they like up there a lot up front, but some of those guys haven't been there when the bullets are flying. So we'll find out next September.
Well, and that was kind of the next question from Viapuri. He wanted to know what you thought about this offense being the best in Vanderbilt history, and how does the offensive line need to improve to make sure that happens?
Yeah, you look back and some of the offenses in the 80s were explosive, and that was more relative to what other people were doing. But I think this offense can be one of the better ones, maybe the best. And I think, I'm always an Andy Ludwig defender. When he was here, I'll say I thought he did a good job. I know some people didn't like him, whatever. But Vanderbilt was fourth in the SEC last year in yards per play on offense. That's pretty good. And I think we'll be good this year. I think a key for the offense this year is center position. I think the tackles. I think Devin Cochran's going to be a good left tackle. I think if Grant Miller, who they like, and this was a quote from Derek Mason to me, that's in my Athlon story, said if Grant Miller plays well, this offensive line can be really good. And he's a guy that's changed his body since he's been here. And they've looked for someone to seize that center position. It really hasn't happened over the last few years. Bruno Reagan played there out of necessity. So I think Grant Miller is going to be a big key for the fall.
All right, I was having this conversation with Seabass the other day. If you had to guess the line on the opener against Georgia, what do you put the point spread at?
Well, taking into consideration that point spreads are really for the public, as much as anything, what the public expects, I think it's going to be high. I think it's going to be like 17.5.
Yeah, he said 13. My answer was 18. So
I think it's maybe one of those where it opens at 17.5, and then as people, Keyshawn Vaughn had 1,200 yards. Jared Pinkney could be a first-round pick. One of those things where as it gets closer, some money comes in on Vanderbilt and maybe goes down a little bit.
Okay, last question before I let you go. This from Foghorn. What do you need to believe in order for us to be a better defensive football team this year?
More beef up front. Now, Derek Mason, all coaches are optimistic. I talk to Derek every year before my story, and he's always optimistic and stuff. But I got the feeling that he really believes that the defensive line, with grad transfers, and incoming freshmen, will be better, more bulk up front. He said, we thought we got there last year, but our guys wore down, couldn't keep weight on, didn't have the numbers up there. And, I asked him basically, what's been the biggest problem on defense the last 2 years as the defense has struggled? He's like, just too small and not enough bodies up front to stop the run, and can't stop the run, then everything goes haywire. So I think the key for the defense to be better is better bulk, more depth up front. They think they've got the bodies. A lot of these guys haven't played yet. Obviously, losing Jawan Williams is key. I think there's enough bodies at cornerback. I'm not saying they'll be as good at that position, but I'm not overly concerned about the cornerback position. My concern is the stopping the run on the defensive line.
Yeah, the thing I'll watch is can they have a corner that plays anywhere near what Jawan Williams, the level he played at? Because that did change some things when you can't just – when you got a guy that can – on occasion lock down that side of the field, that changes things, and they weren't very good even with him doing that. But I think what you're saying on the defensive line is a lot of what I'm hearing. There seems to be some optimism that they're going to get better there, and I think that would mitigate a lot of that.
Yeah, clearly. So, we'll find out. Might not be a great we might not know after the first game. Georgia might have the best offensive line in the country. And obviously they're loaded on offense. So that will be a tough task because but we do our unit rankings and stuff, and I think we had Georgia with the number one offensive line in the country.
Mitch, I know you need to go and get caught up at work. Anything worth discussing that we didn't get to today?
Not really. Would have we could have bounced around basketball a little bit more, but kind of on a time crunch. But not really. Just looking forward to some postseason baseball coming up.
Well, we are thrilled that you're back with us. I wish you the best of luck on getting Athlons ready. I know it'll be really good, as it always is. Tell people where they will be able to find that once it hits newsstands, how else they can order it, and also tell people where they can follow you on Twitter, please.
Okay, well, our magazines, the official on-sale day for our college magazine is May 21st. We have our SEC magazine, great cover with Keyshawn Vaughn. But also this year we have expanded our national edition, which is the one that has coverage on every team. We're going over 300 pages for the first time. I think it's that's our best-selling product, and it's one that I think is really, really good. So you can find that at newsstands or athlonsports.com/store. But again, take a look at the Keyshawn Vaughn cover. It's really cool, and we've sold well at the Vanderbilt bookstore. We got it. As long as this keeps selling well, we'll keep putting out Vanderbilt-only covers. And then the NFL magazine coming up in early June, and you can follow me on Twitter at AthlonMitch.
Thanks for joining us.
No problem, Chris. Talk to you later.
He's Mitch Light of Athlons. I'm Chris Lee, the host of the Vandy Sports Podcast. Thank you for listening today. We'll have several more of these coming later in the week.